Psychoneuroimmunology, I absolutely love this. I know it's a bit of a mouthful, this one, but people need to hear me out. So this is the science that is now, 45 years old. It started with two researchers, Adler and Cohen, who showed that the functioning of our immune system can be conditioned, and that was in 1975. And this science draws on a lot of different disciplines. It's a very interdisciplinary science. So we're talking we're talking psychology, psychiatry, we're talking genetics, we're talking biochemistry, all sorts of things it draws on, immunology. And it literally aims to explain how our psychological processes, our psychological health affects our immune function via the endocrine system. Because we've got this
excuse me, the endocrine system, what's that?
So that's the hormonal system.
Hormones.
So when we're talking about stress and we're talking about all those stress hormones like adrenaline.
Right. So you're saying that our emotions or the way that we think affects the balance of our hormones.
Correct.
And
yes.
then that affects how our bodies function. Because if you've got low testosterone or really high testosterone or low estrogen or really high estrogen, it changes the way your body functions. And you're saying that how we think can affect that?
Yes, and not just that, but through those connections, particularly through the connections to the nervous system and the stress hormones, we also connect it to our immune function. So this science really looks at those interactions between the nervous system and the immune system via the sympathetic adrenal medullary axis, which is the SAM axis, which is essentially, it involves the HPA axis and the sympathetic nervous system. So all of these is so intimately connected in the body. You know, we cannot forever go on separating those things because those things work very intimately together. And we now have several decades of this. There are other sciences that are looking at that, but just from the point of view of psychoneuroimmunology, we've got 45 years of research that actually shows that this dysregulation in the nervous system, in the HPA axis, and also obviously the vagus nerve is a big connection here as well. It's a slightly kind of separate area, but it's the same thing. What goes on in our head and the mindset really impacts the immune system.
I want people to understand this. I really do, because I think this is critically important to understand. 45 years of science, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of papers tell us that stinking thinking is real. That when you have some type of a charge on the things that happen in your life, you know, the people you meet, or she said this to you, and the way you interpret that, how we process all of that information directly affects the production of our hormones. And when you directly affect the production of your hormones, that directly affects the function of your immune system.
That's basically the crux of it. You're quite right. The bottom line is this: our psychological processes can make us either sick or they can make us thrive. It really just depends what goes on inside our heads, because essentially what we need to understand is all stress is internally generated. Okay. When we look at trauma and study of trauma, again, you've got loads and lots of research that shows you very clearly that two people can go through the exact same experience and one of them will come away traumatized and the other won't. And that is because the stress that is associated with it and how then the trauma is neurologically registered is really an internal, it depends on the internal interpretation of the external event. And that's really what the message that I want to send out. We always talk about root causes of chronic illness. We need to start talking about emotional. This is what I've been actually talking about for a long time, but it's about the emotional root cause. So what is exactly behind that reaction? Is it some sort of trauma? Is it some sort of limiting belief? And let's not forget that for most people, this goes as far as birth, as far as the womb. And for many, many people, it goes actually back to even previous generations, because the intergenerational trauma is real. and it leaves an epigenetic imprint on the body. It impacts the gut, it impacts the microbiome, it impacts all those things from the word go. So you can actually be born into this world already slightly compromised from that point of view, and then you go, you pop out the womb. Maybe the birth itself is traumatic. That was what happened to me. And then there is a lot of stress associated with the birth process and the baby coming into the world. Then there may be some issues around bonding, because obviously if there's trauma during birth, then maybe the bonding between the baby and the mother may not be great. And then of course, we enter this very vulnerable time of our lives, which is the first few years of our lives, where we are so neurologically, energetically, emotionally, in every way, we are very, very vulnerable. And it's very, very easy to traumatize a small child. It doesn't take a psychopathic parent or a narcissistic parent. A child, because it's all about the internal representation and interpretation internally of what's going on around us, then what that means is that if this child doesn't think that their needs are being met, that they can be traumatized, and the parent could be doing their absolute best. But if the parent themselves have got, maybe they've got unresolved traumas, maybe they've got limiting beliefs, maybe they've got some sort of weird ways that they think that the baby needs to be like maybe disciplined, or they have some weird ways of bringing the child up that maybe is not in line with satisfying this child's emotional needs. Essentially, it's all about what the child feels inside.